This is a machine that's avoided the chop on 3 occasions. It's had 3 retirements and has managed to keep going. Now, whether that's the spirit of the machine that's managed to do that, I don't know. So we're now actually celebrating its 4th life. Now, the Harwell Dekatron computer was designed and built by the 2 chaps on my left and Gurney Thomas, who I'm afraid isn't with us anymore, in early 1950 at the Atomic Energy Research Centre in Harwell near Oxford. Now, we're very happy, as I said, to have 2 of the original designers, to have Ted Cook-Yarborough and Dick Barnes with us today. Ted Cook-Yarborough, who was responsible for really, I think, the instigation and the design of the machine. It's a very simple question. Why did you build the computer? What was the situation at the time at Harwell?
Well, our job was to use electronics to help the whole research program.
This wasn't an experiment, was it? This was a project to get a working machine rather than research.
That's right.
Did Harwell, the management at Harwell, encourage you in this sort of enterprising work?
Well, we hardly needed encouragement.
Obviously, this is probably the biggest store of Dekatron tubes that actually existed in the world before. Why Dekatron tubes? Why relay-based technology?
Because all the very early computer projects, despite the obvious problems of building them, they all had the problem of how do we store data and instructions, and some of the, as at Manchester and at Cambridge, for example, the development of storage devices was a major project in its own right, whereas thanks to Ted having spotted the Dekatron, here was something which was a ready-made storage device for 1 decimal digit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did the designers know how computing would turn out? How do you see this machine now in history?
I think it is impossible that people could imagine the future, because the real breakthrough came several years later, with first the transistor and then the integrated circuit, so that all these digital cameras which are being flashed around here today have got processors in them which are much, much more powerful than this.
Before the machine arrived, what tools were available for the mathematicians at Harwell?
Basically, I joined Harwell at the end of 1948, and I joined the computing group, which was a part of the theoretical physics division in Harwell. And the group was run by Dr. Jack Howlett. And we provided a service of computational expertise, if you like, to the various divisions in Harwell. So when the machine was delivered to us in the 50s, it was regarded by us as an additional tool we'd been previously using. Sometimes electrical calculating machines, sometimes hand calculating machines, on doing the calculations that solved the problems the scientists wanted.
And really by 1957, the machine wasn't really being used at Harwell anymore. More modern commercial systems had been bought. Now this is the first time where the machine might have been dismantled or scrapped. But a mathematician called John Hammersley, who had given lectures at Harwell, he actually belonged to the Oxford Mathematical Institute, organised a competition to find a college or potentially a school or university that could put forward the best case for having this machine. And the college that won that was then called the Wolverhampton College of Technology, and they won the competition. Now the machine was shipped to them from Harwell, back of a big furniture lorry in 1957, and they'd assembled the machine within a week so they were really sort of quite switched on, the machine working. It then took them till December to work out actually finally how to program the machine. And at that point, renamed the machine. And they renamed the machine the Witch, which is the and I never get this right, it's the Wolverhampton Instrument for Teaching Computation from Harwell. But from 57 onwards, it was known as the Witch. Now, we're very lucky that the machine at Wolverhampton was championed by one of the staff members there, Cecil Ramsbottom. And Cecil wrote papers, notes and manuals, really got the press involved and got lots and lots of pictures. Any opportunity he could, got the press involved to take pictures of the machine. And that's now an invaluable resource. Actually, if that hadn't happened, that whole period would have been lost. One of the photographs that always appears whenever this machine's talked about from Wolverhampton is one of the masters and one of the students standing in front of the machine examining a piece of tape in the most incredible detail. The master was a chap called Frank Hawley, who looks like he's seen a vision in this paper tape, and the chap next to him was a young grammar school chap from Wolverhampton Grammar School, but this chap was Peter Burden, and Peter's with us today.
The college was organising something called Commonwealth Technical Training Week, and we wanted to get some publicity for that. Now, at this stage, I'd already done a computer program for a local company designing keys and for Messrs Chubbs, and it was a nice application of the Witch. It chugged away over 2 or 3 weekends doing that. So this was an obvious thing to hang the publicity on, and the Mountain Express and Star came around and said, we'll have a photograph of you doing that. And I got involved with the machine through there was an evening class for an evening lecture for local sixth forms, and I was hived off to that one Thursday evening in November 60, I think it was, and after about an hour they said, well, that's how the machines work, come and have a go, chaps. And never having even thought about computer programming before, within an hour and a half I was actually doing it. We programmed it to work out e to the x, the first 3 terms of the series. I remember doing that.
But as Peter said, by 1973 the college had moved on and bought commercial systems as well, and the machine finds itself redundant again. And again could have been scrapped, but actually part of the work, because of Cecil Ramsbottom, he arranged 2 things. He got in touch with the Guinness Book of Records at the time and had the machine listed as the world's most durable computer, the longest living computer, and that's a record which we believe still holds. Cecil also arranged that the machine wouldn't be lost and would go to Birmingham Science Museum, Birmingham Museum of Science and Industry. Now, this is where I get involved, because I'm in late 1970, well, 77, 78, I was a sort of geeky teenager, not that the word geek had ever been invented or thought about, but spent every Saturday afternoon at Birmingham Science Museum, and I knew absolutely everything that was on display. And a whole group of us knew more about the artifacts on display than any of the curators knew. And I spent hours staring at this machine, but then jumping ahead really 30 years. And at that point, I'm a trustee of this museum, we're getting this museum going, and also a member of the Computer Conservation Society. And that's an organisation in the UK that's been responsible for rescuing and saving machines and building replica machines. And I was looking through a series of pictures that were taken at a storage centre in Birmingham by a colleague of mine, Chris Burton, who's with us today, and saw in the corner of a picture the control panel from the computer. Everything else had been dismantled, it had been quite thoroughly, completely dismantled, but I saw the control panel. I thought, oh, actually, I know that. I know exactly what that is. And that triggered really my going back to finding notes, actually going back to see my mum to get the notes that I kept, which she'd kept, of course, and I got all of these notes. And a whole series of visits between myself and the rest of the team, and it was Tony Fraser and Johan at that stage. We went back to Birmingham and scoured the whole place. We found, I think at that point, probably about 90% of the machine throughout that collection centre. And that machine, that was then brought back to the museum here, 2009, and started the process of restoration. Delwyn, I've talked about the machine getting here. What state was the machine in?
Well, as you can imagine, after 30 plus years in storage, everything was very dirty. Apart from that, the main problems we had were a little bit of damage that had occurred within storage at some point, so wires snapped and a few components dented and broken. But very early on we realised that we got all the important pieces and that actually restoring the machine was going to be feasible.
Right. What I need you to do now to explain to me and to everybody else is actually how the machine, in simple terms, how the machine works.
Okay. This is actually the perforator which you mentioned earlier, Kevin, that we found on a subsequent visit to the collection centre. For those not familiar with it, which I imagine most of you are not, it's called a perforator, and what it does is it allows you to type out program code, and that's punched onto punch tape. So this is what a punch tape looks like, the sort that the machine uses. It has 5 holes, and the pattern of holes that's punched out on each column there represents an instruction that the machine is going to operate on. Once you've punched out your program, you would then load it into the selection of paper tape readers that you can see here. So this is one of them here. So moving on from the tape readers, come over here. We mentioned relays earlier. You can see we've removed 2 of the covers so that you can see the relays. Obviously all of these covers contain relays under them. These relays are the same type that we used in telephone exchanges in the 1940s, 50s, and of course very reliable, very well built. And unfortunately they're also mainly the reason that the machine does operate quite slowly, because being mechanical it takes time for the contacts to move. Arithmetic in the machine is carried out using a device called a Dekatron, which we touched on earlier. So these are Dekatrons here. In fact, I'll point at the brighter ones. They're actually all on. I don't know if you can see that. There's 2 different types of Dekatron here. And if you look at a row of stores across here, you can see exactly the number that the machine is storing. But it really does mean that it's very easy to actually just look at the machine and see what it's doing. It's really like looking inside a machine in terms of the operation. Once you've run your program and you want to get results out, that's done over here, and we've got 2 output devices. Under this cover you've got what we call a reperforator, and that punches the results out onto paper tape exactly as the paper tape that is fed into the machine. So you would do that if you wanted to, if you're printing out intermediate results that you want to then feed back into the computer. The other thing we have is a printer. Might not look much like a printer for anyone unfamiliar with 1940s technology. These peripherals, I should say, they're both much older than the rest of the machine. They're actually 1940s technology, and we think that they were to hand at the time, and they were specially modified at Harwell to work with the machine.
The time has actually come, Derwin. Can you actually run a program for us?
I hope so.
Right.
I'm certainly going to try. It's been working fine all day. I'm sure it will be great.
Yeah.
So first of all, we'll enter an instruction to start the program off. So now it starts to read from the paper tape reader. Now it's now stopped and is prompting me for input. I'm going to give it the first number to be multiplied, and if you keep an eye on the stores, that's going to go into this top store here, which has been cleared to 0.
So that's that one.
I'm going to put in 3, 3, 3 and so on, and you can see that's going to roughly a 3 o'clock position. Now it's being printed out. This, by the way, illustrates the speed at which the machine operates each digit. So now the second number, I'm going to put in 3.0. Okay, now what's going to happen in a moment, we've got our 2 numbers to multiply. The result, as I said, will go into the accumulator here. So first of all that will be cleared, and then the machine will do its multiplication operation, and you'll actually be able to see it forming the answer 1 digit at a time as it goes. So we'll let it run. And there you can see a row of 9s appearing in the accumulator. And now that's being printed out on the printer. When the program completes, the green light comes on to tell you that everything is good and finished and it's ready for its next job.
And I have in my hand 3.3333 multiplied by 3 is 9.9999.
Yeah. You would have thought it.
Bart Fossey mentioned earlier about a chap called Jack Howlett, who was responsible for computing at Harwell. Now, Jack, in 1979, described or remembered a test or possibly a race between Bart Fossey and the machine. Now, I think this story has grown over the years, and I think it was some exaggeration at the start. Actually, the story is that Bart sat down with this machine and actually attempted a race. And the story goes on as well that they both kept up with each other for half an hour, and then Bart, bless him, retired exhausted while the machine carried on. Now, I suspect this might have been a part of a test or a bit of fun, but in that vein, what we're going to do shortly is rerun that test. Now, Bart has actually agreed to do that as well. So Bart will be equipped with a mechanical calculator, and Delwyn has devised a similar program for the machine. And we think one way or the other, actually, I think they should be able to keep up with each other.
The story you've heard is not actually correct, but never mind, it's a good story. What I actually did was to code a machine to solve a set of ordinary differential equations. So what I did was brought the tapes into the machine room, set them up, set the machine going, and I took the hand calculator that I had into the machine room at the same time, and I started doing the calculation by hand because I knew what the algorithm was. And I did 3 steps. At that point, I needed to see whether what I'd got myself agreed with what was on the printer when the printer was available. So I stopped. But I reported the fact that when I was writing down the last of the elements on the paper, right on the first step, the machine was producing its results. Same on the second line, and the same on the third line. As Dick Barnes will have told you, the machine was known to be not very fast. And we knew when we had it that it wasn't going to be a fast machine. So it wasn't altogether surprising that I got that result, and I reported it to Dr. Howlett what had happened, and I said that confirms that the machine is a little faster than a hand desk operator, and he embellished it into a race.
Right.
So are we ready?
I'm not going to wave a flag. I'm not going to...
Okay, we'll start, shall
Let's
we?
go.
Okay.
So I start by setting 1.1 on and multiply it. And I notice it's 1.21, so I copy that onto the keyboard, deduct it to make sure it's right, and then multiply it by 1.1. And I see the result is 1.331.
That's right.
Well, you're ahead at the moment.
I'm writing that down. You see, I'm not very efficient at this now. Was.
See, this illustrates.
And I get the number 2.197. I'm going to do one more. 1.4. 1.4 multiplied by 1.4. But where a problem had something which you did over and over and over again, it was ideal for this machine.
Bart, thank you. I think
you very
that's
much.
extremely game. I think Bart and the machine could probably do with a round of applause at that point. I think we can declare a draw after all this time, but I'm extremely relieved.
Absolutely, Nelson. Thank you, Bart. What does the witch mean to us and to you? It's obviously important to know how these old machines work and to get them working to prove we can do it. But it's more important than that. It's educational. You saw, some of you, that we had a party of school children in here before you came in, and they were learning an awful lot, which they would not learn otherwise. And that applies to all the things that we do at TNMoC with very old computers and very new computers. Kevin and Delwyn have written a book It's in draft still because we want to put in the book photographs of today's proceedings, but then it will be available and on sale. So thank you again for all coming. I think it's been a remarkable and a marvellous afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.